Hello and welcome. My name is Odette, and in this video, I'm going to give you a brief introduction to plagiarism and referencing, including information on paraphrasing and building APA 7 references. I'm sure you may be aware of the concept of plagiarism, but in terms of your academic career at Endeavour College, it is essential that you understand exactly what constitutes plagiarism and how to avoid it. In essence, plagiarism is the act of exhibiting another person's work as your own. There are two kinds of plagiarism, intentional and accidental. Intentional is when somebody is deliberately dishonest and willingly submits work belonging to somebody else, whether it be an author, creator, or another student's work. It totally undermines your academic integrity, but it is also the easiest to avoid by simply completing your own work and writing your own assignments. Accidental plagiarism is more common, as most people do try to do the right thing. Accidental plagiarism occurs when someone incorrectly identifies or doesn't include enough information to properly attribute the author of a source. Usually students simply don't know how often they need to reference in their assignments or miss key pieces of referencing information. By the end of this video, you should have a basic understanding of the referencing requirements needed to avoid this. When writing your assignments, you need to include a reference as soon as you cite information from another source. This includes quotes, paraphrases, images, statistics, or uncommon facts and opinions. You will find that the majority of your assignments will consist of information from external sources, in which case you are required to paraphrase the information. Paraphrasing is understanding and discussing the content of a source in your own words. For example, reading the findings of an academic research paper and writing a paragraph on that topic in your assignment. This is often preferred to a direct quote, as it demonstrates you understand the information in that source and can articulate it yourself. No more than 10% of your assignment should be direct quotations. The majority of your work will be paraphrasing. Including in-text references when you paraphrase in your assignment is how to avoid accidental plagiarism. When citing information in the body of your assignment, you need to include two key pieces of information, author or authors, and date of publication. You can see from this table here, which is taken directly from the Endeavour APA 7 guideline, there are two ways to cite a source in text. The first is simply including the author name and date in brackets at the end of the sentence. As you can see here, we have Gabby, 2011 in closed brackets. You can include this at the end of a sentence to denote this is the source that you are using. Alternatively, you can work the name into the sentence. For example, you could start a paragraph as outlined by Gabby, and then following the author name, the date in brackets, then go on to discuss this source. Both of these formats are equally correct. One is not better than the other, and it's up to you when you're writing to decide which flows better in your assignments. The number or type of authors can change how these in-text citations look. Again, there are examples in this table. For one author, it is simple. Just include the author name and the date of publication. For two authors, we include both author surnames. And depending on how you're using it, whether in the brackets at the end of the sentence, we are connecting those two surnames with an ampersand or the little and symbol, or if we're working it into the sentence, we connect them with AND. For three or more authors, we include the first author name followed by et al. Et al denotes that there are more author names here. However, there are too many to include in the in-text citation. Otherwise, the work gets clunky, there's a lot of extra names, and it essentially helps you keep your word count down as well. Sometimes institutions or organizations may be the author of a source. In this case, we include the name of the organization as the author with the date of publication. This is particularly common in things like websites that sometimes have companies that own the content. In that case, see who has the copyright of that source, and more likely than not, they are the author or the owner of that content. Now that we've covered how to reference in the body of your assignments, we're going to look at building our end text references for our reference list. You'll find that the APA 7 style is pretty consistent when formatting the reference list citations. All reference lists must be in alphabetical order with a hanging indent. When referencing a book, we start our end text citation with the author's surname, followed by their first initial. Then we include the year of publication in brackets, followed by the title of the book in italics and sentence case. Then, if there is one, we include the edition of the book, followed by the publisher. You can see in this example here how a print book is laid out. We have the author's surname to start, followed by their initial, and then the date in brackets. You'll notice that these two key pieces of information are what we used when we were using our in-text citations. From there, we have the title of the book in italics and sentence case, the edition in brackets, and you'll notice that this is not in italics, then the publisher of this book. This is another example of a print book reference. It looks a little bit more complicated, but that's just because we have a few more authors that have contributed to this source. You'll see if we look closer, it follows the exact same style as our example on the previous page. We have our author names, followed by their initials, author name, comma, initial, comma, and so on. We have the date of publication in brackets, the title of the book in italics and sentence case, the edition of the book in brackets, and the name of the publisher to complete the reference. Down here, I've broken down this reference into color coding just so you can see those key pieces of information that we're using to fit in the reference. You'll see that we have the authors, the date, the title, the edition, and the publisher. All book references follow this format. So once you understand that this is how these pieces of information fit together and you're following this punctuation and style, that is your APA 7 reference. Referencing an ebook is very similar to referencing a print book. In fact, if you are using an ebook through the library, so for example, you found one of your textbooks in the library catalog and you were using that to work on your assignment, your reference would look exactly the same as if you were referencing a print book. And there is an example of that here. You can see that we still have those key pieces of information: author, date of publication, title of the resource. This resource doesn't have an edition, and then the publisher at the end. However, if you are accessing a book through the web, for example, something like a Google ebook, which we have down here, you need to include the link to that ebook, but the beginning of that reference starts exactly the same: author, comma, first initial, date in brackets, title of the resource, and publisher. For this one, we are just including a link to the resource because it is coming from outside of the library. Referencing a journal article looks a little bit more intimidating, but that's just because there's a few more pieces of information that we need to capture to reference this resource. Journal articles are published at a much faster rate than books. Therefore, they usually have a few more pieces of information like volume, an issue, and a DOI, just to make sure that they are able to be found again. This same rule applies, like we talked about with the ebook. If you're accessing an article through the Endeavour library, include a DOI if it has one. A DOI is a digital object identifier, and that is essentially a special code that is unique to that journal article. And it's very easy to find that journal article again if you have a DOI because it's unique to it. However, if there is no DOI, you do not need to include a link. However, if you are accessing articles outside of the library, for example, something on Google Scholar, if there's a DOI, always include the DOI. If there's not a DOI, then include the link. It just makes it easier for your markers to find that resource if they are trying to get to it when they're going through your reference list. You can see from these journal article examples that they actually start exactly the same as our book references. We start with the author surname, followed by their initial, for however many authors we have, followed by the year of publication in brackets, and then the title of the article. From there, we have the title of the journal the article is published in, the volume and issue number, the page range, and then the DOI or the URL if we are accessing this outside of the library. This is an example here. We have our authors to begin with. We have our date of publication. We have the title of our journal article, This is also in sentence case, but you'll notice that this is not italicized like a book title is. The journal that the article is published in is italics. The volume is also in italics. And then the issue is in brackets, the page range follows, and then the DOI ends. You can see here we also have this hanging indent for this reference, and this is how it looks in text. And this is that journal article example broken down into those color codings like I showed you before. Once we have a bit more of an understanding of what these pieces of information are, it's easier to slot them together into that referencing style. So we always start with our authors, followed by the date of publication, the title of the journal article in sentence case, the title of the journal the article was published in italics, the volume of the article in italics, followed by the issue in brackets, the page range, and then the DOI. Every journal article will be different, obviously, but as long as you're grabbing those pieces of information and putting them into this format with the same punctuation, then that's the referencing style. This is another example of that, again, found in our referencing guide. This is an example of a journal article found in our databases that does not have a DOI. It starts exactly the same way with our authors, our date of publication, the title of the journal article in sentence case, the title of the journal that article was published in italics, the volume in italics, followed by the issue in brackets, and then the page range. It feels like there should be something here, like a link, because the DOI isn't available. That is correct because this is from our library subscribed databases. But like I said, if you were looking through the web or on Google Scholar, then you would need to include a link. The last kind of source you might be using to complete your assignments is a website. Please be aware that we do recommend using something like a journal article or a published book over a website, simply because the information in those resources are of a higher quality. For example, an article published in a journal has been vetted and probably undergone a peer review, which means that the information is of a higher quality than something that's just been published on the web. So to complete a website reference, we're starting exactly the same as our other kinds of references with the author. You can see from this example I have here, this is actually an institutional author. So not a single person, but a government organization is responsible for the content on this website, followed by the date. And you notice here that we actually didn't have a date available on this website either, in which case we put n.d. which essentially just means no date. We also include this in our in-text references as well. So rather than leaving that blank, we include the n.d. for all of our references. After this, we have the title of the web page in italics, and then a link to the website. So in conclusion, follow the examples in the APA 7 referencing guideline available through the library. It's a very comprehensive document. We've tried to make it as helpful as we possibly can. And be aware that that document is updated. So we do take on student feedback and keep it current. So make sure that you are using the most current version available on the web. If you're still having trouble with your referencing, use the knowledge base to search for commonly asked library and referencing questions. If you're having trouble with something now, chances are someone's come up against a similar query in the past, and we've put all of our commonly asked questions in a searchable place for you. If you're still having trouble, feel free to reach out to us via email or book a consultation with a librarian in your LMS for one-on-one referencing support. Do have a go yourself. We have a lot of resources available to help you with your referencing, but we are more than happy to have a consultation with you, go through your in-text and end-text references and give you feedback. That concludes the video for today. Thank you so much for watching and good luck with your studies.